This is Brad Montgomery. Welcome to the Successful, Interesting, and Awesome podcast, where I interview people who are, wait for it, successful, interesting, and awesome. Or at least one of those three. Everybody, I've missed you. Have you been washing your hands? My name is Brad Montgomery, and I'm very excited about today's interview. This is a woman I've been wanting to interview for a long time because she's that kind of person that just makes you feel good about life while she decodes all kinds of mysteries. And let me explain. This woman is a rock star in the speaker world. She's a keynote speaker. She's a diversity expert and trainer. She's one of these people who's just uber talented at communicating. And I happened to be at this dinner with her, and there were three straight dudes about my age and Jess around the table. And so I can't remember how it came up, but it became like the Ask Jess game. And so we were talking about, what does this word mean? Is this word insulting? Can you tell me about that? Because there's no way I'm ever going to ask anybody but you what the heck that means. And she just not only lifted the veil on a lot of these topics that I've read about and sort of know, but don't really know. But more than that, she just made me feel safe that we're in this road together, and it's not as scary as I thought. And there are some tricks and some tools and tactics and some language that we all can learn. And today, we're going to do just that. Please welcome to your home office, your sofa, your kitchen table, your bed. I'm not judging. This is Jess Pettitt.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. So you remember that dinner? It was like, we should have named that thing like three straight boring white guys walk into a bar with Jess, and she teaches them stuff they just wish they knew.
What's funny is that's like a typical day in my life. So where it was not necessarily that memorable, that part of the conversation. It's always great to build community that it allows people to feel safe to ask questions that they don't know the answers to. So let's bring it on.
Well, and I have questions, but let's start right there, because you said that's just like, for you, it was like Tuesday. And for me, it's like, I've never talked to anybody who has personal experience and expertise in that world. Like, we're talking never, Jess. Not like never. It felt really special.
Well, to be completely frank, I understand that. And if we change the topic or the subject to something, I recently was on a Zoom call with a client who got interrupted by their 9-year-old child, who had some very exciting information to share about Tasmanian devils that I had never thought about. I had never asked about. I didn't know anything about it. And I was completely taken aback by my lack of knowledge of my ignorance of the subject of Tasmanian devils, right? So it can happen to all of us at any point in time. Be ready.
This topic is way more sexy than Tasmanian devils. I don't know anything about Tasmanian devils, but seriously, it's better.
Brad, offensive.
Let's get started. I love that you've put this question up here, Jess. Ask me everything and anything you're scared to ask. Extra unicorn points if you stump me. I know Jess well enough to know she really means that. Let's start with something easy. By the way, interesting fact for you. I got a lot of emails, so I put in the Facebook post, if you're chicken to post that question, here's how you reach me. In case I felt alone thinking, this is kind of awkward, I got a lot of questions offline. So the first one, can we just go through LGBTQ plus? There's a bunch of words I understand. I know gay. That one's pretty easy for me. Bi, I think I got that one. But like trans, I don't really get that. Transvestite, transsexual, trans. What's a plus? Is L as simple as you're a lesbian? What's a...
Perfect. So the alphabet is a wonderful place to start. So the Cliff Note version of these things, so that they're not all like mini TED Talks. So there are straight people that exist in the world. That is where we need to start. Then there are some people who are not straight. And by not being straight, they sometimes are represented by the letter G, meaning gay as an umbrella term, which is not straight. So there are straight and gay people. So then gay became kind of a community. And inside of gay, people started realizing, excuse me, if you are not a white man, are there other letters? Because I don't feel represented by the only white men who are speaking. So more letters began to be created. And I would like to say that one of the coolest things about language is that more words are always being created to define who you are and who you are not. So as a shout out to feminism, the L was added first. So then it was the LG community, right? Still white women and white men, but that's a different workshop. But okay, LG. So then bisexuals, which is the B, shows up and like, hi, sometimes you don't allow me to be bisexual because you want me to pick a team of either being straight or gay based on who I'm in relationship with. Bisexuals don't even get the privilege of being able to be single. So the B was added. And then the T was added largely because when we're started to talk about hate crimes and that kind of language came up, is it's people's gender identity or expression that is perceived by other people. So someone walking down the street, usually if they're targeted by a hate crime, it's because you perceive someone to be a man that is acting too feminine, or you perceive someone to be a woman that is acting too masculine. So then that is why they get targeted. So even though being trans or talking about gender is not about sexuality, it is targeted by the same hate crimes.
Wait.
So that's how the T got added.
Hold the fort. I hadn't thought about that. So people are not
I
getting
know.
beat up because they're gay. They're getting beat up because they look other than what people expect.
Right.
True.
Very, very few hate crimes start off with a customer satisfaction survey.
What do you mean?
So if someone is going to be targeted, they're being targeted because something they are doing is making the person feel very uncomfortable that results in my need to be violent. That is why someone gets targeted. But they don't get targeted because they're in the middle of a sex act. Sometimes they don't get targeted because they're in the middle of proclaiming their love to someone who is same sex. Sometimes that happens. What they typically get targeted by, what I have been targeted by, is that I'm not behaving or looking the way that people are expecting me to, and they are somehow threatened by that. And that is the perception of my expression, right? Like, that is how I am in the world is threatening to someone else, therefore gets targeted. So that is why the T got added, because the commonality was the threat to others.
And just what does T mean? Trans what?
Excellent. So literally the idea of the words trans, meaning that you are transforming or transitioning between, we really like this binary, there's only two options thing. So when we started using the word transsexual, it was to get someone to quickly move from A to B, which in this case usually meant someone who was born as a man and who identified and is living as a woman, to then be perceived as B as quickly and as successfully as possible. One, because once you're perceived inside of the binary, you are not targeted by hate crimes. And also it makes people more comfortable. So transsexual then started getting used as transgender instead of transsexual, because not everyone, this is pre-Obamacare, not everyone had access or was interested in medical or surgical intervention, surgeries, hormone therapy, things like that. So transgender was supposed to be a little bit more inclusive because it took the biological sex-based, anatomical-based changes out and made it more about gender identity and gender expression. And then, of course, academics were debating it. So then it just got shortened to trans. And then now the T is also being actually now kind of changed to being gender non-conforming or gender non-binary, all in the development of allowing someone to describe who they are or who they aren't.
Well, okay, so I walk into, I'm with a person and they say, I'm trans. And I say, terrific. What does that mean to you? Because it sounds like you just labeled, you had a 5-paragraph essay. I don't, like, do I get to follow up on someone who says they're trans?
You can, sure. Usually, if someone is the language that I would use there is outing themselves as having a particular history that you may or may not be able to know, they are sharing something with you, right? So similarly, I could come out as being a vegetarian who is originally from Texas, not something you were expecting. Now, being a vegetarian likely is not a frequent hate crime target, so I'm not equating the two. However, if I was a vegan, maybe. But
And if you are in
by
Kansas,
right,
like
exactly. So
ranching
if I was
communities.
if I'm coming out, I'm sharing that information with you. And by sharing that information with you, I might actually be opening a window to a conversation with you to ask questions. And Brad, one of the things I think is important is that in those moments when you're like, I don't know what to do. How do I say? What? That moment is an excellent moment for you to be like, aha, I feel like I'm supposed to know the answers here, and I don't. And by feeling like you're supposed to know, that's like the entitlement of being privileged, right? Is that you feel like you're supposed to know, but who said you're supposed to know everything about everyone all the time? So you don't know, so then ask questions. Or if you're not comfortable asking questions, take notes and Google it later.
Well, let's get specifics.
Yeah.
I have two very close friends, um, and they have children, and clearly something is going on with the kids with gender, but I
Great.
don't know what it is. But I'm super curious because I love these people, and I'm also open to the concept of whatever's going on. But I don't know if I'm like what are the social rules that I'm waiting for? If they don't bring it up, I don't get to ask because I definitely don't want to offend anybody.
So the hard answer is it depends, right? So some of this information is deemed private, and if they're not opening a door for it, then you should respect and acknowledge that they are not opening a door for it. They may also not know that you are interested and a comfortable person, and they could open the door. It is also possible that they forgot they haven't told you.
Ah,
So it's not that they're not telling you, it's that they think that you already got that pamphlet and you're still friends with them. So you can't know. So the best thing to do is to ask a question, especially in this particular case. I would ask the question to the friend, the parent, and just say, like, you know, gender is a really interesting thing and I'm learning a lot about it. And it seems to me that your child is expressing themselves in a way that may or may not be what you had expected. Are you supported in this process? Is there something I can do to support you in this process? And you're just being curious and generous. And they might say, what are you talking about? They just cut their hair. Like, Brad, it's
yeah.
fine. They might also be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to tell you about what Zoe has decided about themselves. So having a realistic conversation
Barry
is
says
important.
asking and reaffirming pronouns use reaffirming pronoun use always a good place to start.
Right. Hi, Barry. You're a really good friend of mine. Right. So one of the other things that you can do is formulate your own habits before you need them. Right. So like what Barry is referencing is acknowledging that pronouns happen, and most of us who are perceived by the gender that we actually identify means that people use pronouns to talk about us correctly. So we don't even remember what a pronoun is. So then if you practice or make the space for, like, hey, by the way, I use she, her pronouns, Brad, because I know your pronoun choice, you use he, him pronouns, or maybe you say masculine pronouns, I say feminine pronouns. You can make that available and it just becomes a normal habit. And then that normalizes the idea that I don't want to make assumptions about you. And you get to be yourself around me. How would you like me to address you? Same thing goes when people ask, are you a Jessica or a Jess? Right? Like,
Right.
excellent. For
And
Jess. Thank you for
so
asking.
maybe just ask. I'm trying to read between the lines. Maybe if I meet somebody and say, "Oh, by the way, I have masculine pronouns." Maybe I'm just signaling that I'm an ally and kind of open to the concept. Yes.
Sure. Or it's just a thing. It's just a regular occurrence. And when you get used to it, then it becomes less of a thing. And there is a possibility that somebody uh, really needs that done first. Otherwise, they're obviously going to have to say it because people will make the wrong assumptions about them. So then you just try all the time. Now, what's interesting is, and Brad, I think you'll love this, is that in my email signature, I say preferred pronouns, she, her, hers. So some of my more liberal progressive friends are like, how dare you still call this preferred pronouns? They're not preferred. They're just the pronouns you like. And I'm like, that is true. However, most of the people that I'm working with that are receiving my emails, this is still such a new topic that I have to meet them at the language that they are using so that we can actually have a conversation about it.
Well, I've told you this before. The whole thing makes me feel old, Jess, because I feel like my heart is quite open to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all about making people feel welcome and confident and good. And if people help me to treat them that way, then that's great. Yet I'm also like, what? I don't understand.
Right. Because this is the theme of today's show, is that there are times where we know we don't know something. We find out that we don't know something. And then we feel like we are entitled to know the thing because we don't like realizing we don't know something. So I'm evidently an expert, right? La, 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 la. So back when we used to be able to walk around with people, 2 summers ago, I was in the Seattle Pride Festival. And I, the expert, was walking around and I didn't know all of the flags. I did not know some of the symbols. I had not heard of some of the words. And I'm walking around like, excuse me, have you looked at my resume? I am an expert. What is going on here? What is it with these utes? What is this new thing? And even I, the expert, had to take some notes. I took some screenshots, not of people, that's rude, and did my own homework. Until one time I was actually writing in my little notepad, because I, of course, walk around Pride with a fanny pack with a notepad. I am actually, in fact, old. And a person came up to me and was like, oh, are you drawing a picture of the flag I'm wearing? Because they were wearing this flag as a cape. And I was like, I actually am. And they're like, do you know what it means? And I said, actually, I don't. That's why I'm drawing a picture so I can go do my own homework. And they said, oh, can I tell you what it means? And so then me, as the diversity expert, was like, hi, you're at Pride. I don't want to take from your time and burden you by having to educate me. I'll go do my own homework. To which they said, it's Pride. What better way than me teaching somebody what I am proud of? So we grabbed a piece of lawn and they explained to me. And because I'm old, I don't remember. But it was a moment, and I am responsible for continually learning.
All right. First of all, that story explains why I love you so much. That's delightful. And I like the fact that you're open to learn new things and that you are also eager to not make sure it's someone else's burden.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I empathize with all those things, only you have no idea, Jess. I'm a straight white 50-year-old dude. Like, everybody, I have to burden everybody. I can't ask a single question without being a burden.
Well, I find that
you know more than I do, and you were stumped.
Right, but I know more about this category, and this is a Jeopardy column where you would have to phone a friend. Okay, well, you're open to phoning a friend, right?
Right.
Like, there are millions of Jeopardy columns that I would have to phone a friend, and there are questions you could ask in the column of my expertise where I need to have the humility that, you know what? I don't know. I'm going to have to phone a friend.
Well, let me jump back into the questions because I have so many of them, and I realize we're still on the first one. I was asking you about LGBTQ. Walk us into the
Get into
word
the
queer.
Q or the plus.
What's queer?
Can I do the bonus letters? Okay, so we've explained why the L is first, the G, the B, and many definitions of the T.
Yes.
Okay, so then Q got added, and sometimes it means questioning, and sometimes it means queer. To some people, queer is a bad word, and to some people, it is a re-empowered word. And for me, it is an empowered word. However, you can also call me queer in a way that does not have the connotation that makes me feel powerful. I can tell the difference. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but it's one of those subjective in the moment things.
Well, oh, yeah.
Right.
All
It's
those
all
things.
about use.
Can I can call you queer without insulting you?
I sure. And you can call me queer as an insult. It depends on your intention of the word. Right?
How about if
I
I
can call
say
you
I know a woman named Jess. She is queer.
right.
Is that
In that sense, you're not saying like, ugh, she's queer. You're saying this is an important piece of my friend Jess's identity.
oh
You're saying with power, right? I could call you an onion, and am I making fun of you being bald, or am I calling you a vegetable? Right? Or am I calling you my sweet onions because you're one of my favorite friends that I get to sprinkle in my life? All of them are the same word. It's all about intention.
how much of like the word queer? What if I'm using the word queer in a sentence with anybody but you? Do I have to get permission first? Meaning, you told me I don't mind calling myself queer as long as it's not an insult. But are there
Mhm.
other people I'm going to meet who say like, "Hell no, don't use that word with me ever"?
100%.
Oh,
100%. So let me get so remember when you go like that, it's because you feel entitled to get it right all the time.
yeah.
And it's different each time. So old 1900 sales strategies is you have a little index card for each lead, right? And you make little notes. So each person, you got to make little notes. You have the skills, right? It's not, you are not going to be able to download the GPS map 3.8 version and have all of the answers for all people. That's just not going to happen, right? So, and you already know that, but because it's a Jeopardy column that you don't know about, your anxiety gets increased and you feel entitled to 3.8. But you can have a conversation with me about my favorite pizza toppings and be like, I had no idea you like green olives. You're weirder than I thought.
Yeah.
And it's not threatening, right? So, okay, so let me give you an example and then I'll go back to the things and I'm also reading the questions. Okay, so if, okay, I actually, if you got to ask what word best encapsulates your gender and your sexuality, Jess, and go, I would say dyke. That is
Oh.
100% of who I am. Okay. But
Oh.
what is funny, depending on who I am with and where I am at, I might be able to say the word dyke. I might also have to say lesbian, which is not a word I identify with, but it's close enough in the right circles. Some circles I might be able to say queer, but in other circles I'm going to have to say gay. And I have to read the room based on what I'm perceiving about the room to even actually explain how not straight I am. So if I have to do that, the least you could do as an ally is say, hey, Jess, what word do you like? Right? You get to ask
Right.
once. And every single person, every single room, because it's a subordinated or marginalized identity that's not necessarily visible, I have to read the room, guess, and compartmentalize who I am and how I want to share. So then the ally gets to ask just me once. And then they write it on their little index card and it feels affirming.
All right,
That's
I'm
cute.
learning. You're killing it, by the way, and this is so helpful. And to prove it, here's Deborah Fine says, "This is so darn helpful." I'm with you, Deb.
Da-da-da! Okay.
All right,
Do you
so
want me to
wait,
finish the letters?
yeah,
You're in
but
charge.
go back. I'm only allowed to get you one question for you, and then if I see you a year and a half later, I can't ask again?
Of course you can, because it's probably different.
Oh, okay. And I'm trying to picture you. So you're walking into like a cocktail party, and you are, while I'm looking around for, hey, where do they keep the bourbon? You're trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what are those words? How will I define myself today?
Right. And anybody with any kind of marginalized or subordinated identity is pre-navigating that before they even show up into the space.
Right.
And then they show up in the space, and then depending on what happens in that space, they will constantly be reassessing how it is they're supposed to show up. And that if we're using a party setting, it might actually change each time you bump into a different conversation.
Hmm. Well, if I invite you to my party, how do I let you know? Well, you and I know each other, but if I didn't know you very well, how do I let you know I'm an ally?
You invited me to the party, so that I'm assuming that it is a safe place for me to be. Now, I will also say a caveat is that I have been invited to parties where I am the token diversity invite, which is basically feeling like the roasted pig at the center of the table, where people are like, so I heard this about you. Tell me everything. Right? And that is horrible. And so then if that's happening from the guests, right, then your job is to tell your friend they're being obnoxious. But you don't have to apologize to me that your friend is being obnoxious. You just need to do something about your obnoxious friend.
All
Right?
right.
Like an example, in our industry, I often volunteered to share a hotel room with someone just because I'm an external processor when we're at conferences or something. So this woman who I don't know at all said, oh, I'll share a room with you. Okay, great. So we shared a room. First day goes fine. Second day, we're getting dressed in the morning and stuff. And she's like, well, do you want to try on any of my clothes? And I was like, no, oddly, brought my own suitcase full of my own. Thanks. So we get done with the conference that day. We go back. We're asleep. We're in different beds, and we're talking in the bed. And then she starts talking about the first time she wore a dress and how freedom it was for her. I have no idea what she's talking about, so I go to sleep. So in the morning, she's like, why don't you try this on? And she gives me her jacket. She's like, it was very expensive. So I'm like, all right, what is happening? So I put this lady's jacket on, and then she tells me how important it is to her that she shows up as an ally to trans women like me. Now, fun facts. I do not identify as a trans woman. I actually identify as what is called a cisgender woman. So here's a little vocabulary Scrabble word for people.
Yeah.
So cis is C-I-S. I know you got a pin. C-I-S is the Latin prefix that means congruent. So I was labeled a girl when I was born. I was actually labeled a girl at birth because my parents were hippies and they said that I was going to be twin boys. Surprise! Just a fat girl. And once I had a sense of agency about myself, I agreed, right? So you're friends with the kids who may be having some gender situations. They are coming into their own agency and they may or may not be agreeing with how they were labeled at birth. Okay, great. This woman assumed that I was trans because I talk about LGBT, trans, diversity, things like that. So she assumed I was trans and was proving that she was an ally by volunteering to stay in a hotel room with me. So then was so mortified when I told her I don't identify as a trans woman. Is this why you're having me try on your clothes? What is happening? And then she left the hotel room. Well intended, very strange. Happens all the time.
She left the hotel room as in, like, I'm moving out because I don't want to deal with Jess?
Mm-hmm. She was so mortified she left during the next section.
She thought she offended you.
I think she offended herself by making a really awkward assumption.
Well,
and to be honest, very funny for me.
Yeah. Well, there's a piece of me, as goofy as she sounds, that identifies with her because, right? You're like, oh, I like Jess. I want to let her know I'm on her team.
Yeah. And how privileged is it of me to be able to find that humorous where had I actually been a trans person, imagine what that would have been like to be treated that way. Right? Like, I got the butt of the joke because I don't identify as a trans person, and I caught you, this woman, in her feeble attempt of being a trans ally. Right? Like, but I have privilege because I can do that,
All
and
right,
it's
so
fine.
let's go back before the woman left and before she stepped in it by saying you're trans. Because what might she have said to say, Jess, I'm an ally?
She could have said, I'm interested in sharing a room with you because I am assuming that you are trans because you teach about the subjects that you do before we even got into the room. Um, but my guess is, and this is me trying to be charitable, is that that in itself is awkward because she felt entitled to all of my identities because of the assumptions she made based on what I teach about. So then, unfortunately, months had passed with her believing her assumptions were true until the very moment I'm wearing her very expensive, very ugly 1980s jacket, um, that I got to point out that she was very wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, that's the danger of this entitlement, is that you will prove yourself right until it is literally mortifying. Or you could just say, I don't know this up front and actually ask a question, which is actually being an ally.
Well, you and I were friends a long time. And honestly, I kind of wanted to say like, "Hey, Jess, what's going on in your world related to gender
Mm-hmm.
and sexuality?" But there was no way I was going to ask that because I was too terrified. And then you took it upon yourself to explain it to me one day, just out of like a gift. You said, "I'll bet you'd like to learn about this," and I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
Am I
And
right that I was I right in not asking you?"
I don't know that it's my place to say or to not say, because two conversations are happening at the same time, right? Like, you want to know something, but you've been trained that you're not supposed to ask that question. And there's probably some conscious or unconscious sense of entitlement of knowing that answer. And I am also navigating a friendship with someone that maybe at some point recognized you don't know this information, and I feel safe with you, so I'm going to share with this information with you. There are times where one of my classic defense moves is to over disclose as quickly as possible. And if you survive, now we can be friends.
Can you?
Um, but
Is it? I
it's
don't know.
self.
Is it too personal to ask you like how that? What would that look like if you were to overexpose as a defensive technique?
Imagine some of the people we both know, and I just introduce myself as, "Hi, I'm Jess Pettitt. I'm a dyke married to a man who used to be a dyke who now identifies as a straight man but is a professor, so I live in this really rural town, and that's why I travel for a living. What do you do?"
Hyperventilate.
Right. And if you can't handle that, there's a reason I just knocked you back on your feet a little bit. Sometimes it's passive aggressive because I've been sitting in a board meeting with you, listening to you mansplain and talk over and interrupt every woman or man of color in the room. Um, Sometimes it's just fun for me. I get to have fun too. And there are other times where I don't believe you're going to be able to hang with me. And so I want to prove myself right. And the person totally can hang with me, and I end up with a good friend because it's a very strange introduction.
I'm just struck with how exhausting it must be to have to deal with this every day, Jess. I have a like the godparents of my daughter. It's two women married forever, and one of them was telling me when every single person she has to say, think about, should I say my spouse? Should I try to leave out any reference to that woman at all? Should I call her my wife? But you have all of those things that she described to me with quite a few extra layers, right?
I'm
You
super calm. It's true.
dyke married to a former dyke who is now a man. Like
Who
that,
identifies as
you got a
straight.
lot more going on.
Yeah.
It must be
And
exhausting.
I am also a middle-aged, upper-class, highly educated, cisgender white person, right? Like, I want to make sure that both of those buckets stay part of the conversation, right? So when it's very common for people to be like, man, this is exhausting. And the first thing is that people specifically who have visible, subordinated, and marginalized identities, so they are not perceived as straight, or they are not perceived performing the gender that people assume they're supposed to, and identify as straight. Either way, like those folks, not all, like exhausting would be an upgrade, because a lot of those people are navigating the world in danger. You know, like one of the most powerful moments, and I said this, and it literally like rocked my partner and I back on our heels. Notice in that moment, I just decided, do I say my husband or do I say my partner? This little talk is about LGBT stuff, so I'll say partner, but I've already outed that I am a trans partner. Like that just happened just in picking that word. So I was talking to my partner about a trans woman friend of his who was living in Seattle, who was riding a bike and got hit by a bus. And in the moment, she's an artist, and so the paintings were all for sale to cover her funeral expenses. And I remember saying, like, wow, as a trans woman of color living in an urban area in the United States, what a privilege it was to just die in an accident. And then it dawned on me, it's because trans women of color, specifically in the United States, usually die at the hands of a hate crime. Far more like than a heart attack, cancer, an automobile accident, right? Like, but I said that without even realizing what I was saying. And then it was like, oh my gosh, like I, as a cisgender person, I have the privilege of likely dying by natural causes, right? So the exhaustion of navigating a world that is constantly threatened by my existence. So then when you actually bring in your privileged identities and you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Like that's part of the reason why folks often are like, oh, really? You're going to join a book club? And at least join a book club. You know, like you can join a book club and be only joining a book club at the same time of joining a book club. P.S. I have a book club. Good enough now, book.com. All of these things are true, and it is exhausting because systems of oppression are exquisitely designed to produce the results they get, which is bafflement and confusion and self-talk that you're not being an ally good enough. Right. So then you just stop.
Let me remind our listeners, if you have a question about a coworker, what language to use about a kid, about a friend, or just generally how to exist in life with things you're nervous about, here's your chance.
Yeah.
So
here's what. Go ahead.
I feel as a straight white guy who kind of feels new to all of this. I didn't know the word non-cisgender 10 years ago. Like,
sure, neither did I. It didn't exist 3 years ago.
Oh, nice. Well, that makes me feel good. Like, there's just so many.
You're not.
You know, you say I'm married to a guy who used to be a lesbian, or you said dyke, I guess. Sure. So much of that is new, and what I tend to feel is you're right. I feel insignificant, and that I don't know, and I feel resistant to change because I'm scared, and it's so, I think, important for me to hear. I have no clue. You're dealing with this throughout the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And being an ally is recognizing that, like, there's a lot of things that are happening that you are privy to and that you are not privy to in the exact same moment, right? So, like, some of the questions that have been coming in is like, well, what is the correct language to put in your email signature? The language you're comfortable with. That's the answer, right? And if you get asked about it, you could justify why you have that language in your email signature. There is not a way. There is the way you choose to be. When there's another comment about anger. And what I think is really interesting is that deep friendship allows for me to be able to share my real experiences, and my friendship with you. You can hold space for, I'm actually not angry, but you can hold space for things that maybe at one point made me angry or really hurt my feelings, or times that I have really been in danger. And I can hold that space for you too, because you also have experienced a time where you felt endangered. You've experienced, my friend Brad, a time you have felt angry or sad. And that's what friendship is, right? Is that we're able to hold that space. And where friendship, I think, elevates to ally or advocacy is that you're willing to actually do something that is, you're not prepared to be as uncomfortable as you are about to be, but you feel called to do it, right? So like one of the best examples, I'm blanking on the woman's name who said this, and it will come to me probably as soon as you stop going live, but it was on PBS, and it was in reference to the woman who took the Confederate flag down from the pole in South Carolina, whose name I'm also blanking on. Both of these people are women of color. I'm tracking that as well. So there is a white man who was the accomplice while the woman of color climbed the pole and took the Confederate flag down. This is particularly relevant to me because I went to grad school at the University of South Carolina when they protested the state, and it came from off the top of the Capitol to the little park, and then they were taking it down from the park. Okay, so the police show up. I'm trying to rush the story. The police show up and they decide that they're going to use their taser on the metal bar or the flagpole, and that's how they're going to get the woman down who's stealing the flag. So the white man didn't just stand outside of the fence. The white man who was there to be an accomplice or a helpful or an advocate stood inside the fence while the woman of color climbed the pole. And when he heard the police officers have this idea that would electrify the pole, he just placed his hand on the pole. That's all he did. But by doing that, they now were like, oh, we can't electrify the pole. Now, they didn't consciously say, like, well, we don't want to electrify the white man, but we do want to electrify the woman of color, because that's how unconscious bias works. But as soon as he made that gesture, that option was no longer on the table. That is being an ally, because you're able to take the variables at the moment and go a couple of steps out, what could happen, and then intervene. And I have to be an ally to people too. So that's why it's work.
All right, here's metaphorically putting my hand on the pole.
Oh, shall we do this way? No,
we're
this
backwards. Way. I got to do this. We're hopeless.
Here we go. Here we go. Right. It's coming. It's coming. There it is.
Oh,
there it is.
Okay. That's kind of cool. Ooh, someone take a picture. Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Jess,
screenshot
is this the right word isn't stuff, but is this new? Meaning, when I was in high school and college, I didn't know anybody who was. I don't think I knew anybody who was. I had a really good buddy who was gay, but the non-cisgender, trans, queer, I don't think so. But they probably existed, but I don't know. Is the number of people who label themselves?
Smart question. Yeah, super smart question. And the edit I would make is that you don't know anybody who identified this way.
Yeah, that's right? Definitely crossed my mind.
Right. I get asked all the time, like, how many people are there? So what's interesting about gender is that it's fluid. So I don't know, right? Like, so it's similar to how many funny people are there? Like, everyone has the possibility of being funny at some point in time. Everyone has an anatomy and a biology. And on that anatomy and biology, they have written an identity in a way that they express themselves. So when I see someone who is dressed up like a cowboy and I see somebody who is dressed up like a stockbroker, their life and is expressed in their clothing, how they carry their body, how they walk down the street. That expression of gender, even if they're both white men, is very different from one another, and it's about who they are. We all have this in common. Now, does it contrast what other people assumed about us in the first place? That's not something everybody has to deal with, but it is something that a lot of people have to deal with. And, some people blame the internet. It's the internet because it's given rise to the communities.
Right.
But the internet has also helped people stay alive, educate other people, and allow people the space and freedom to do their own homework when they realize they don't know something. So it's not necessarily new. It's just something that we're talking about now, you know?
I hear you, and I think that's progress. Okay,
Yeah. I
but
mean, even if we take like, now I don't mean to get all wonky, but if we take the most recent Bostock Supreme Court case, that based on that particular case, without getting super wonky, basically it is you cannot, no longer in the United States is it legal to fire someone based on what you think is their sexuality or their gender identity and expression. That is illegal to fire someone. Now, first off, just because the Supreme Court said that doesn't mean everyone's following suit. And two, um, is actually Ruth Bader Ginsburg that had probably the most ignorant questions as far as using the right language and what it means and what people are afraid of, etc. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg is like a liberal hero, right? But like, I'm reading through the transcripts because I read transcripts of Supreme Court cases for fun. And I'm like, no, you got it wrong. It's so important for you to get it right. And she got it wrong, right? And we're still learning. We're all still learning.
yeah, okay. Let's go back to some of the words. I don't
I
think
know.
we finished with LGBTQ, right? I think
No,
we.
we did LGBTQ. I'm keeping track. So we have the I and the A and the plus.
Oh wait, so it's LGBTQIA plus.
Sometimes.
Okay, what's IA and plus mean?
Yeah. So this is the thorough show. So we're doing everything. So it is
I
important to
gotta
mention.
add the I and the A. Okay.
Feel free. So it is important to mention that the alphabet soup is cumbersome. And it also is important to mention that people have fought very hard for their letter to get any recognition whatsoever. And in doing the string of letters, you're clearly leaving people out. And the longer the letters get, the more obnoxious this whole thing actually seems. So it's not necessarily something to memorize, it's just something to be familiar with.
All right.
So LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Q is queer or questioning. Sometimes it has a little square above it because of Q and Q. Okay, I means intersex. And we used the word hermaphrodite, but we don't use the word hermaphrodite much anymore. Fun facts and why I don't get invited to parties is that Hermes, the ideal male, and Aphrodite, the ideal female, were heterosexual and had consensual fertile sex, resulting in the ideal blending of all things male and female is their baby that they named hermaphrodite, which is also important to mention that this is mythology and did not actually occur. But hermaphrodite is a word that people use when their biology or anatomy does not perfectly align with the male or the female column, and it's been pathologized. So now we would call someone like this intersex or have an intersex condition where their external or internal genitalia, hormones, things like this, their giblets, as I like to call it, do not match all of the check boxes on only one column. So that's what the I is for.
I need to write the
intersex.
I'm writing down the word giblets.
It's an important word. I am Southern after
All right.
all.
I is intersex. Got that one?
Yep. A, fun facts, can be ally. It can be advocate. It can be accomplice. It can also mean asexual. And all of them are correct. So ally, advocate, and accomplice are synonyms that intellectuals argue being very different words, but it means somebody who's trying to be nice. And Brad, as a straight person, if you were to advocate for LGBT rights, there is a possibility that somebody else, usually a straight person, would think that you must be gay because you care about LGBT rights. So then you also could be targeted, which is why the A got included in the first place. Asexual is someone who does not have sexual or emotional inclinations towards anybody. That doesn't mean they're broken. It just is how they are. They don't identify that way. So that also could be an A. Then easy is the plus sign. The idea of the plus sign is now that we have gone through this whole laundry list, we clearly have forgotten somebody. So you are included in the plus sign.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Got it. Thank you. That silence was me processing. I might have looked stunned. I wanted to ask you about some potholes, meaning there are some things we could just memorize as here's a rule, don't do that, that's bad. And when we talked long ago, you said, no, Brad, you don't get to ask what is in people's pants. That's
Yes,
not
that is
appropriate.
true.
It's not any of your business. And I filed that away like, okay, that's a rule. I'm good with rules. Can you give us other ones? Like, I'm really interested in language. You called yourself a dyke. I'm pretty sure I can't ever use the word dyke.
Maybe, but you could with me. Yeah, you just said it and you didn't even catch on fire. And your intentions were good because I told you that's the word I want. So, number one rule, everyone should write this down. It is never appropriate to ask somebody what is their internal or external genitalia. Never appropriate, unless you are a medical professional. And when you are a medical professional, it is only if the internal or external genitalia parts are relevant to that medical visit. If they're there for an earache, you do not need to know what their testicles do or do not look like, because that actually has no correlation with an earache. So that is number one. Everyone can write that. Okay. Number two, and a little side note of that one, is that if you have not actually investigated your own genitalia, you're not entitled to anyone else's. Okay. Other pothole that I would say is, and you're actually, go ahead.
Has that been an issue that people don't know what their own genitalia is?
Yes.
You're not joking.
Oh, no. You've obviously never been a woman. Yes. As a woman, I was very discouraged from ever being curious or asking any questions or touching or finding anything out about my own body. Very discouraged. I was deep into my 20s before I realized like this was okay. Which also gets into like body shaming and internalized sexism, but that is clearly a different workshop. Okay, so don't ask people about their junk. You're not entitled to know.
Wait, I gotta just say that out loud. Don't ask people about their junk.
Yeah, you're not entitled to know.
Did I mention I like talking to you? All right, what's next?
Okay, number two. How do you have sex? Guess what you're not entitled to? Am I having sex with you? Then you don't need to have this conversation. And if I was going to have sex with you, we would probably need to have a conversation about consent, what we're into, what we're not into, what are our boundaries, what are our not boundaries. And if we're not likely to have sex, you are certainly not entitled to know how that works.
And I'm assuming these are questions you've been asked.
Pretty regularly. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I'm sharing you my responses. So when people ask me, again, because I talk about this, people assume I'm trans. So then they always want to know what my body parts look like, to which I say, I am an almost 50-year-old Southern woman. I have no idea. And I bet you don't either. Similarly, when people ask about using hair dye, I will share, I'm probably not the only person in this meeting who uses hair dye. I might just be the only one who chose blue. Okay, so then sex, I get asked quite often, and my response generally is, I am almost a 50-year-old woman who's been married for almost 20 years. I don't know how I have sex. So you're getting all my jokes. You're welcome.
So yeah, you're deflecting and you're using humor.
Right. But the other option is shaming them because it's such an embarrassing question they feel entitled to, which I do keep in my pocket. So you get the joke. So now look at self-preservation. You get a joke, which is just enough generousness from me to show you, you are not entitled to that information. I'm going to give you a joke and laugh this off so that you feel a little bit better. But if you ask a follow-up, you're going to get embarrassed, right? Because it's none of your business. So, okay. So that's the second one. Do not ask how people have sex with each other. People ask like, well, who's the man in the relationship, right? Like a relationship has to have a man in it. And I know a lot of relationships who have men in it, and men don't do the jobs that the man does, the woman does, even in a straight relationship. It doesn't make any sense. You feel entitled to know things. Don't do that. The third one I would say, and you were actually role modeling this really nicely with the use of the word dyke a second ago, is there will be settings when, Brad, someday, possibly in the near future, you and I might be standing in the same room. I possibly took an airplane to get there. We might have even been eating food with metal forks that I didn't cook.
Oh,
So,
that.
I know.
Stop me there.
Man. I know. Someone is going to whisk the plate away.
Maybe
Can't
we
even
could
wait.
be in a public place. Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So when that happens, there will be times where you will hear me talk about my husband. When I mention my husband as my friend, you will know she did not call herself a dyke. So then you have two options in this moment. And this is sort of hypothetical because I don't think you actually do this, but I'm just role playing it for other people. So then when people feel gossipy, they might be like, oh, Jessica, why did you say husband? She identifies as a dyke. You are now outing me and correcting my language to show other people how cool you are.
Right.
Don't do that. There's a reason I said husband in that moment. And it's because I, in that moment, felt like it was the best word. Trust me, every scenario has plinkoed through my head and it has resulted in me using the word husband in that moment. And your job is to follow my lead. So the pothole, to use your language here, is to not correct the language I use to describe myself so that you get like, ha, 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 I knew this information, and you get your Scrabble points.
Wait, but I almost understand you, but not quite. Like, so then you and I have a conversation where these words come up and the way you describe yourself, and then I'm later with my wife. If I say she described herself as a dyke and has a husband,
later on you're processing with your own people. I'm talking about in the moment with the third party, right? So then people will, it's very common, and that's why I wanted to name this as the third one, but people will out information about people that they had the opportunity to say about themselves and they didn't do it. So if I don't do it, trust me that there's a reason I didn't do it. Now, it doesn't just have to be sexuality and gender, right? Like if the third person is like, oh, Jess is so tired, and you happen to know that I'm going through chemotherapy, but that person does not know I'm going through chemotherapy, then your job is not to be like, I have a secret. Guess what? She's going through chemotherapy. Like you just don't do that. But we actually do that because our ego wants the Scrabble points of like, ha, 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 I know more information than you do.
Right.
Don't do that.
That's kind of the information is currency thing, which I think is annoying in any social setting. But I see how when you have complex personal things going on, you just like, shut up.
Yeah.
All right.
It is. One of the questions that came in that you flashed is like, what's the most inappropriate question I've ever been asked?
Yeah, this is a very wonderful person who asked that.
Yeah. So here's what's really interesting. So because this person is on your thing, I immediately assume positive intent by this question because it seems like a perfectly logical question to ask. But I have been asked this question by people who I felt intuitively, whether I was right or wrong, I felt intuitively that they are asking this question out of malice. And I will answer with a joke and blow it off. The reason why is that this question is actually the most dangerous question, not just inappropriate, but dangerous question I have been asked. And if I don't listen to my instincts, I have actually gotten into what's the safest way of saying this? Dangerous situations because of it. So with good intention.
Before you go on, the most dangerous question you're asked is, hey, Jess, what's the most inappropriate question you've ever been asked?
Yes.
Oh, mind blown. Walk me through it.
Yeah, but let me explain why. So the most dangerous question I have been asked is something about who am I? What am I doing? How did I find this space, etc. That doesn't seem, I know, Kim, no malice intended. Totally good. I'm just using it as an example. It's also probably a common woman named bias, right? Is that Kim is the person asking this question. So I feel a little better. Kim knows about Brad's show. So I feel a little better because you got some like.
Jess, I'm married to Kim.
Oh, great. See, even better. So she obviously makes good choices. Wonderful. So when I have been asked this question and I didn't trust myself, what I basically have stumbled into, without this turning into an X-rated show, is a man trying to make me straight, which usually has involved being followed out of an elevator, having some kind of confrontation at my hotel room door.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, these are safety things that people don't necessarily have to think about unless they have a subordinated or marginalized identity. So the most inappropriate question is just enough information where they feel like they can fix me, or it becomes a power dynamic. And I actually have been endangered by the question. Your hand is up.
Yeah, I don't get it. I still can't. So that a guy asked you this, and it turns out he wanted to fix you. That guy sounds creepy and horrible, but I don't understand what was it behind that question? What's the most awkward question? Because he was just a jerk. I don't understand how the question is jerky.
So I'm not trying to not answer it. I'm just trying to keep it so that it's not triggering for anybody else. So specifically, as I think a queer woman who back in the days of traveling was traveling by myself, I think that predators exist and sexual assault is real. And as a woman traveling by myself is something that I have experienced multiple times while traveling by myself. And the inappropriateness, and I know that this isn't what Kim, I'm sure both of you are like, wow, this is not what I meant. But the question, the line of questioning starts off with what's the most offensive thing I could ask you? What's the most inappropriate thing I could ask you? And if I'm not paying attention and they don't have all the benefit of that I'm giving them, maybe that I'm paying attention to, then I will start answering them. And what ends up happening is it gives them an entry point or an access point to basically feel very entitled to attacking me, I guess is the best way of saying it, under the guise of fixing me. But so I have to really pay attention, specifically when I was traveling by myself, because this is part of the reason I also don't do a lot of training from my subordinated and marginalized places, because it's dangerous. And I try really hard to do a lot of training from my privileged places and encouraging other people to do that, which also then puts them in a different place. But it's also out of self-preservation.
Yeah.
A lot of straight men feel like they can fix lesbians, and a lot of straight men evidently enjoy being predators.
Well,
and now for a magic trick.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Like, I don't doubt it for a minute. And I'm sorry you have to go through that. But I'm still also stuck back on what it is about that question that makes you realize danger area. This person, I got some trust issues already just from that question. And I can't tell if that's because I will never know because I'm a white straight guy, or if I'm just missing something.
Honestly, I don't think you're missing anything, because I'm not beating around the bush in that sense. I'm just trying to not really talk about being sexually assaulted on the show. That's more what I'm trying to avoid. But it's such a clear question that the question becomes an entry point that I have to be really careful with. And maybe it's also, and Brad, possibly something that adds to not understanding is that I get asked, what is the most inappropriate thing I could ask? I get asked that question hundreds of times a week. And so it's instant, right? So it's not surprising that it showed up in a show like this, right? And not to make you feel like you're not unique. You are a lovely snowflake. But what I mean is that people don't want to do the wrong thing. Nobody wakes up and says, you know what I want to do is super offend people today. I don't believe that most people wake up that way. So it's a genuine, honest answer that is completely unanswerable. But maybe I shouldn't have answered it this way at all, but like for the people who are actually interested in malice, it is the socially appropriate way to enter that conversation. So of all the questions about anything I have ever been asked, it is the question that I have to immediately, who is this? What is their name?
Right.
What assumptions do you have about them? Who are they associated with? Where were they in the room? How are they standing there? How did they type it? Is there a typo? I actually prefer a typo when it's a chat or a text because I think they're nervous to ask me. And I need that in order to understand what's happening.
Well, again,
but taking all that away so that it's not so depressing, there is no appropriate answer. Any question you ask could be inappropriate. You know, like when I use this story all the time, but like when a friend of mine, back when we had brunch, called an emergency brunch and I hadn't seen her in a long time. And I was like, absolutely, let's go. So she came, she showed into the restaurant, and I opened with this really great joke I knew about divorce. And that is why she called the brunch, because she had just been served divorce papers. Whoops, I didn't know that. Well, that's like the most inappropriate thing you can do to start off a brunch about your getting served divorce papers, and I didn't know that. So there is actually no answer. And maybe I should have that.
But I think really what I'm learning is just you are forced, unfortunately and unfairly, to go through a huge mental calculus when people like me, 50-something, white, straight dude, you know, I just don't get it. And hearing what you're going through behind the scenes, I think is really maybe what I most need to hear.
Well, interestingly, it certainly puts exhaustion into perspective, right? So like, there's a lot of things that I get to just clock out of. Like the work that I do from my privileged identities is hobby work, because I could stop doing it at any second and immediately be privileged and winning, you know? And it's so exhausting is a feeling I feel all the time when I'm doing work from my privileged places. But it is not life-threatening.
Here is we're burning through our time so fast. I feel like I have 4,000 questions, and in fact, here's one from Palma. Hey, Palma, nice to see your face. Respectfully, how to respond to grandma who is furious at her born grandson is being raised as a daughter by her parents. Grandma is too old and too Catholic. Best place to spend our energy. Palma, you got something
Excellent
on your plate.
Question. Yeah, excellent question. So I usually have two immediate recommendations. The first one is there's an organization called TIFA. It's Trans Youth Family Advocates, I believe. It's out of Arizona, and it is made up of parents of trans youth to navigate schools, navigate other parents, neighborhoods, HOAs, grandparents, etc. Kim Pearson is executive director. She started it when her own child transitioned. It's great. That's the first recommendation. The second one I would say is allow people some grace. And that is probably not an answer people were expecting. But when you come out against someone else's expectations, the person who held those expectations also has their own process. And it's easy to blame things on religion or age, but it is also possible that older people have way more experience on the planet and have supervised someone who transitioned or knows someone who transitioned. So it's not just age, it's not just religion, it's not just politics, but it is also like dealing with where those expectations came from. You know, so I'm old enough now that I have friends who have children and they struggled with fertility. They finally got pregnant. They finally were a parent. They finally were able to get an adoption approved. They finally were able to foster a kid. Like the struggle of their journey becoming a parent is also rooted in that child. So when that child has the agency to say like, no, then it's coming up against that story too. right? So there needs to be some grace there. And I find that when people are like, whoa, it's because they don't feel like they have the space to struggle with what it means to be, in this case, a grandmother of a grandson is an assumption based on relationships and information that you previously had that seems to be inaccurate information. Okay, well, what does that mean? Please move forward. And
Right.
there's lots of examples where people have to reassess things. My favorite Christian example is actually like really devout Christian folks is the reason why there is a New Testament is because people in the Old Testament were like, oh, I met this guy. I have this whole new way of thinking now. Great.
Dang it! No wonder you're so good at this. No wonder you're. No wonder the corporate world, the education world, every freaking world needs you.
Well,
You have a
I
real gift
appreciate
of taking fairly complicated. Well, no, not fairly, ridiculously complicated concepts that have, in this case, lots of emotional baggage, and then you make a joke and you articulate it in a very short sentence, like "Don't ask anybody about their junk." Right on, you. Palmo says
Thanks.
thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I really do recommend TIFA. To be completely honest, it's Trans Youth Family Allies. It's Trans Youth Family Advocates. I get the A's confused. There's probably a joke there. But Kim Pearson is the executive director, and I highly recommend that organization.
Right on. We're getting there to the last question, and I'll tell you what it is now. So as I yammer, you can think. I love to ask people about what gives you hope, and just you get to interpret that any way you want. Hope about the topic we're covering now, or just hope generally about pandemics, or about your job, or puppies, or I don't know. That's the fun thing.
Well, first off, puppies, hands down. Answer number one question. But honestly, Brad, like in the whole arc of our conversation, and I really mean this to anyone who's listening, as well as to you. If I could, I would be making direct eye contact with you right now.
Oh, I feel it.
But this gives me hope because for a very large portion of my adult life, I did not believe I could have a productive conversation with a straight white man and feel respected and feel seen. And the solution to that feeling that I really was having was to provide space to see and respect white straight men. And if I wasn't able to provide space to see and respect white straight men, I wouldn't have many of the relationships like my friendship with you they're really important to me. And I know in another setting we were having a conversation and I stated how you and a couple other the same guys who were sitting at the table, right? That you don't understand how you're important to me, but you're important to me because 25 years ago, I from a group membership place, did not feel safe or valued by anyone who looked like you. And I have done my own work, which is important. And I also am giving myself some grace that there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's still a reality, but your ability to be vulnerable and authentic and honest with me and yourself, there is nothing more hopeful than the evolution of one's ability to connect with another person. If there was anything, it's the ability to connect with yourself. And that's why you're so important to me. This gives me hope.
Aw.
Puppies!
Aw. So fascinating. Would you be willing to do this again? We wait 6 or 8 weeks and do a skin because we're not. I think we're still on the first question. Like I have a million questions.
That's great. I'm happy to do it. I am happy to because I love and respect you, and I feel loved and respected by you. And yes, let's role play what that looks like in this world. And now more than ever, we need more of that.
Well, I mean, like, I assume you know this, Jess, but I don't. I don't know for sure. If you put a room full of people that look like me together, uh, both male and
You
female,
can
so like
almost
my
get
neighbors or the people I know from my church or whatever, with you not in the room, we are like, what do you do? How did you figure out the pronouns? Are you okay with that? Oh, I'm struggling. Really? Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to forget. There's a lot of anxiety on our part, and it was, I think, just this theme today is we have no idea. Like the anxiety really, like we're focused on. Well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. What if I use the wrong pronoun? We just have no clue.
Yeah, and I mean the powerful thing from this is that humor and trust and friendship and respect allows for a space for you to discuss anxiety and ignorance, right? And it is exhausting, but it is not life-threatening, right? And so like when you reaffirm and you sign back up and you re-up to continue doing ally or accomplice work, advocacy work, again, my mantra, right, is do the best you can with what you got some of the time. So when you re-up and decide I'm gonna get back in it and try a little bit, that is a hell of a lot better than feeling entitled to knowing everything and then sticking it out because you just realized you don't know something. Like
You know what
what
gives
it
me
doesn't
hope?
cost
What
tuna
gives me
casserole.
hope is my youngest daughter works in the food industry in a drive-through, and I think there's 6 or 7 people on her shift, and 3 of them are trans. And my daughter is such a stud in that she's. What's fascinating to me is when I'm kind of hung up into like, oh, is that woman I saw? No, Dad, it's not a woman. He is a he. All right, all right, all right. And I'm still kind of stuck like that, and she is 1,000 miles past. Just like he's he. Well, like the fact that she's just adapted so flawlessly just makes me feel like okay, that is progress. That's one generation. It's just not even important to her, and language is not what all the things that I'm worried about are not there, and that makes me happy.
Sure. And we can all embrace stuff, right? Like when I mentioned group membership, and I know we're way over time, but group memberships can be really overwhelming and often become inaccurate, right? Like all white straight men are acting like this. What a great example, right? And then when you know someone individually, then you're like, oh, I totally get it. This is totally easy, right? So, um, I mean, people screw things up and put their foot in their mouth all the time, and it matters when you feel like you should have known. That comes to entitlement. And it matters when the response is a little more alarming than you were expecting because impact versus intention. And it is individual relationships that are going to help you identify what tools you're not using, right? So, like, even being able to have this conversation, like, this is nothing. This is nothing to me. And if you
Right.
change the topic, be a moron. And you are an expert in the areas that you're experts in. And like, I just sit here like, wow, do more of that. You know?
My 2
So,
buddies, I told you the godparents of my kiddo, they told me years ago, like, everything will be better when everybody knows at least one boring gay person.
yeah.
Like, just yeah, they garden, they grocery shop, they're boring. Like, well, Jess Pettitt, what's the best website to let people know about you?
You can go to goodenoughnow.com. That is my like home base kind of spot. I also bought jesspettit.com, but nobody ever spells my name right. But you could go there too. There's better pictures. But if we're wrapping up, which I think we are, can I share my attempt at a magic trick?
Yes, yeah. Let me put you on solo here.
Here. Yeah, and I'll ask Kim, since you asked a question that maybe I made you feel like you shouldn't have asked, which there's no such thing. Kim, you get to pick the number. Are you still there? Maybe
Well,
Kim's
now I'm
not there
not
anymore.
positive Kim's there. I can't. There's no way for me to
I
know
know.
easily. Can I pick a number?
Okay, well, who? Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I'm gonna pick number 3. It's in your right
Okay,
hand.
the mirroring thing is
There you
hard.
go. That's it. Nope. Back
So
one. Back one. There it is. 3.
3. All right, Brad. Because you are a magician, I was intimidated by you. So to be on your show, I taught myself this magic trick. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Not what you expected.
That is a goat in a sweater and a gold chain.
And with that, thank you very much for letting me be on your show.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate all of you. Just hang on with me just for 1 sec.